What happens when filmmakers decide rules are just suggestions? When they trade polish for pure chaos and turn film reels into middle fingers aimed at the establishment? Welcome to the world of Grindhouse, where the only thing louder than the soundtracks were the gasps in the audience. These were movies that didn't ask for permission. They kicked the door open, rolled the camera, and dared anyone to stop them. Let's see who had the guts to do it loudest. Number 15, The Beyond, 1981. Step into Lucio Fulci's world and you step into a waking nightmare. The Beyond isn't just a horror movie, it's an experience that feels like falling asleep during a thunderstorm and waking up in another dimension. Set in a decaying Louisiana hotel built over one of the 7 gates of the underworld, it's a film that blends art house atmosphere with unfiltered chaos. What makes The Beyond unforgettable is Fulci's command of dream logic. Nothing is supposed to make sense, and that's exactly why it works. Doors lead to nowhere, faces melt like wax, and sound design hums like a fever dream. Censors across Europe panicked, chopping it into a shadow of itself. Some countries refused to screen it at all, calling it too unpleasant for public viewing. But time has been kind to The Beyond. Its strange rhythm, haunting imagery, and refusal to explain itself turned it from banned obscurity into a cult masterpiece. Fans still debate whether it's genius or madness, but maybe that's the point. Fulci wasn't chasing logic, he was chasing atmosphere. And he caught it, bottled it, and handed it to us wrapped in smoke and screams. That's the Grindhouse spirit, confusing, daring, and completely unstoppable. Number 14, Thriller, A Cruel Picture, 1973. If revenge ever had a pulse, this is the sound it would make. Thriller, A Cruel Picture was Sweden's answer to Hollywood's glossy action films, except it looked those in the eye and said, "No thanks, we'll make it real." Directed by Bo Arne Vibenius, it tells the story of a young woman named Madeleine, who's pushed beyond her limits and decides the world needs a little payback. What makes this film hit hard isn't the violence, but the precision. It's stylish, cold, and fearless, the kind of movie that doesn't blink. Censors across Europe went into meltdown mode, cutting entire reels and banning it outright in some countries. But those edits didn't stop word from spreading. Critics whispered, audiences hunted for copies, and the myth grew. The film's star, Christina Lindberg, delivers a performance that's both eerie and hypnotic. She barely speaks, yet every glance burns like a warning. Long before Quentin Tarantino turned similar ideas into pop spectacle, Thriller was already paving the road with grit and defiance. It's slow, patient, and then sudden, it strikes. Thriller, A Cruel Picture didn't just test the boundaries of taste. It showed that cinema could still make people uncomfortable in the best way possible. That's why it endures not as shock for shock's sake, but as a cold whisper that says, "You can silence us, but you can't erase us." Number 13, Cannibal Holocaust, 1980. Some films make headlines. This one started investigations. Ruggero Deodato's Cannibal Holocaust became infamous the moment it hit screens. The premise is simple. A crew of documentarians disappears in the Amazon, and what's found later is their footage. But the way it's filmed, handheld, and painfully real, fooled people into thinking they were watching something far darker than fiction. Authorities actually arrested Deodato, believing the footage was real. He had to bring the actors to court to prove they were alive. Talk about commitment to realism. Censors across the world couldn't decide whether to ban it or analyze it. Most just banned it. Even decades later, it's still considered one of the most controversial films ever made. But here's the twist beneath the chaos and grime. There's a sharp commentary about exploitation and how the camera can be more dangerous than any villain. Deodato wasn't just shocking the audience, he was accusing them of enjoying the spectacle. That's the uncomfortable genius behind the mess. Love it or hate it, Cannibal Holocaust forced a question that still echoes today. How far should a filmmaker go to make a point? It's not a comfortable movie, and it's not supposed to be. Grindhouse never wanted comfort, it wanted reaction. And this one got plenty. Number 12, Rolling Vengeance, 1987. Sometimes revenge doesn't need a plan, it just needs a really big truck. Rolling Vengeance is what happens when a small-town story collides with over-the-top imagination. The film follows a man whose family is destroyed by a group of reckless bullies, so he decides to build a monster truck that can even the score. That's not a metaphor, he literally builds a custom giant truck of justice. The result is a demolition derby of grit, oil, and unstoppable drive. What makes it special isn't just the action, but the heart beneath it. You feel the desperation, the anger, and the grim satisfaction when steel meets steel. Censors couldn't decide if it was horror, action, or something completely unclassifiable. Some theaters refused to screen it, afraid it went too far. But fans saw something else, a symbol of working-class rebellion with wheels and attitude. The monster truck itself became legendary, a Frankenstein creation of torque and fury. Every crash, every chase, every explosion is delivered with that knowing wink. Grindhouse fans love a mix of humor, justice, and total chaos. Rolling Vengeance reminds us that sometimes art doesn't have to be subtle to hit hard. Sometimes it just needs to be louder than everything else. And in this film, the roar of that engine said exactly what everyone was thinking: to hell with the rules. Number 11. Death Race 2000, 1975. Imagine a world where the government replaces entertainment with total mayhem. That's Death Race 2000, a film that asks, what if society's future was one long demolition derby? Produced by Roger Corman and starring David Carradine alongside a pre-Rocky Sylvester Stallone, it's part satire, part roller coaster, and entirely bonkers. Set in a future where drivers compete in a cross-country race, scoring points for chaos along the way, it's a movie that refuses to blink. The cars are absurd, the characters cartoonish, and the tone feels like Mad Max with a sense of humor. Censors didn't know what to do with it. Some called it too violent, others too silly. But audiences, they loved every reckless second. The beauty of Death Race 2000 is that it knows exactly what it's doing. It's not pretending to be serious. It's laughing at the absurdity of our fascination with violence and competition. And the irony? The very people who condemned it were the ones proving its point. Corman's secret weapon was his understanding that shock sells, but wit makes it last. The movie became a late-night sensation, inspiring remakes, sequels, and even video games. It's proof that Grindhouse didn't just break rules, it invented new ones. And if you ever wonder why people love chaos in cinema, this film answers with a grin and a revving engine. Number 10. Maniac, 1980. If Grindhouse cinema ever had a nervous breakdown, this is what it would look like. Maniac is the kind of movie that crawls under your skin and sets up camp. Directed by William Lustig, it follows Frank Zito, a lonely New Yorker whose mind is slowly crumbling under the weight of his own fears and fantasies. The film doesn't just show chaos, it breathes it. Joe Spinell's performance as Zito is unforgettable. He doesn't act like a villain. He acts like someone who never got out of his own nightmares. His small apartment, his muttering, his haunted face, it all feels uncomfortably real. New York itself becomes a character here, dark and grimy, shot through with the eerie glow of streetlights and danger around every corner. Censors couldn't handle it. They called it too real, too graphic, and in several countries, it was outright banned. Even critics who loved horror films walked out of screenings. But for fans of raw storytelling, Maniac was revolutionary. It stripped away the glamour of thrillers and showed something far more unsettling: loneliness turned toxic. What keeps it alive decades later is its authenticity. You can't fake the kind of atmosphere Maniac builds. It's not about blood, it's about dread. The camera lingers too long, the city feels too close, and the silence between the noise is deafening. Maniac didn't just challenge the censors, it forced audiences to ask themselves why they were watching at all. And that's exactly what makes it unforgettable. Number 9. The Last House on the Left, 1972. Sometimes horror doesn't come from monsters. It comes from people who look just like us. Wes Craven's The Last House on the Left didn't just shock audiences, it shook them. Inspired loosely by a centuries-old tale, it tells the story of two teenage girls who cross paths with a group of escaped criminals. What follows is one of the most intense clashes ever filmed for the Grindhouse era. Craven shot the film with near-documentary grit, making it feel like found footage long before that became a trend. The handheld camera, the cold daylight, the silence between screams, it all felt uncomfortably real. Censors across the world panicked. Some countries banned it entirely, others demanded massive cuts. The tagline itself, "To avoid fainting, keep repeating, it's only a movie," became part of cinema legend. What makes The Last House on the Left more than just shock value is what happens afterward. The tables turn, and the line between justice and cruelty vanishes. Craven wasn't interested in giving viewers comfort, he wanted to hold up a mirror. When the film ended, people didn't cheer. They sat in stunned silence. Decades later, Craven would refine his style with A Nightmare on Elm Street, but this was the film that made him fearless. It proved that low-budget horror could hit harder than Hollywood's biggest blockbusters. The Last House on the Left isn't fun. It isn't easy, but it's essential. Grindhouse at its most raw and unrelenting. Number 8. Coffy, 1973. Before the world had superheroes, it had Coffy. Pam Grier stormed onto the screen as the ultimate Avenger, cool, clever, and completely unshakable. Directed by Jack Hill, Coffy follows a nurse who's had enough of the corruption in her city and decides to take justice into her own hands. And let's be honest, no one ever did it with more style. Coffy wasn't just a movie. It was a revolution. It gave audiences something Hollywood rarely did at the time, a strong, confident woman leading her own story. Grier brought charisma, strength, and razor-sharp wit to every frame. She wasn't waiting for permission to fight back. She was rewriting the script entirely. Censors were scandalized by the film's bold tone, its unfiltered language, and the way it turned the usual power dynamics upside down. But audiences, especially those who'd never seen someone like Coffy on screen before, couldn't get enough. It played to packed theaters and became a cornerstone of the 1970s Grindhouse scene. The film's mix of action, rhythm, and heart turned it into something bigger than exploitation. It became empowerment. Coffy didn't just fight for justice, she fought for visibility. And with every punchline and every showdown, she made sure you remembered her name. In an era of sequins and disco, Coffy was pure grit, and that's why she still matters. Number 7. Switchblade Sisters, 1975. Forget the cheerleaders and high school dances, this was teenage rebellion with steel in its veins. Switchblade Sisters, directed by Jack Hill, takes the idea of a teen movie and twists it into something wild, funny, and fearless. It follows the Daggerdebs, an all-girl gang who fight rival crews, betrayal, and a city that underestimates them at every turn. From the opening scene, it's clear you're not in ordinary territory. There's no sugarcoating, no soft focus, just energy, chaos, and attitude. The film moves like a runaway train, packed with fights, friendships, and unforgettable one-liners. Critics didn't know what to make of it. Censors called it too violent. Others dismissed it as pulp. But decades later, it's celebrated as a feminist cult classic that was way ahead of its time. The real power of Switchblade Sisters is that it lets its women be flawed, funny, and fierce without apology. These girls aren't waiting for anyone's approval, they take it. Every scene feels like a challenge to the idea of what a girl movie was supposed to be. Quentin Tarantino later championed it, calling it one of the purest Grindhouse films ever made. And he's right. It's messy, loud, and proudly imperfect. Switchblade Sisters didn't just bend the rules, it stole the playbook, rewrote it in graffiti, and made sure the world remembered who did it first. Number 6. Savage Streets, 1984. If revenge had a soundtrack, it would sound like this movie. Savage Streets is the definition of 80s Grindhouse attitude, neon lights, big hair, and even bigger payback. Linda Blair, famous for her earlier horror roles, trades innocence for fury as Brenda, a high school student who decides she's done playing nice after a local gang crosses the line. This film wastes no time. From the opening credits, it's pure energy street fights, synth music, and a heroine with nothing left to lose. Blair's performance is fierce and magnetic. She transforms from average teenager to street warrior with absolute conviction. You can feel the rage, but also the heart underneath it. Censors, as always, weren't amused. The violence and the tone were too much for some boards, leading to bans and cuts. But the audience reaction was something else entirely: cheers, applause, and a sense of satisfaction that Hollywood rarely delivered. Grindhouse fans embraced it as a modern classic of its kind. What makes Savage Streets special is its mix of pulp and power. It never tries to be polite, it wants you to feel something raw. It's colorful, over the top, and dripping with 80s cool, but there's a sincerity that runs through it. Linda Blair proved she could carry a film on pure charisma, and she did it by breaking every rule in the book. Savage Streets didn't care what the critics thought, and that's exactly why it worked. Number 5. Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, 1975. Some films whisper controversy. This one screamed it from the rooftops. Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, is the Grindhouse legend that made censors everywhere reach for the panic button. Directed by Don Edmonds and starring Diane Thorne, it centers on a prison camp run by a ruthless commander who treats cruelty as science. Even before cameras rolled, everyone knew this would ignite outrage, and it did. Released during the height of the 70s exploitation boom, the movie's mix of war imagery, moral decay, and shocking visuals was too much for traditional critics to handle. Countries across Europe banned it. Theaters pulled it after one weekend. And yet, word of mouth spread like wildfire. Late-night audiences couldn't stay away. It wasn't just the shock value, it was the sheer audacity of making something this extreme and unapologetic. What makes Ilsa infamous isn't just its content, it's its confidence. The film leans into its madness, daring you to look away while knowing you probably won't. Thorne's performance is commanding and unforgettable, delivering both menace and charisma in equal measure. Censors tried to erase it from history, but the film refused to die. Bootleg copies circulated for years, turning Ilsa into underground royalty. It remains one of the most talked about Grindhouse movies ever made, a reminder that the forbidden only becomes more powerful when someone says, "You can't see that." In the end, Ilsa didn't just break the rules, she burned them. Number 4. MS-45, 1981. In a city where danger lurks on every corner, one woman decides silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. Ms. 45, directed by Abel Ferrara, is a dark and stylish revenge tale about Thana, a mute seamstress living in New York, who transforms from victim to hunter. Played by Zoe Lund, she doesn't speak a single word throughout the film, but every look, every step, says everything. Ferrara's direction makes the city itself feel like a predator, loud, unkind, and constantly closing in. You can almost smell the steam rising from the sidewalks and hear the heartbeat of danger echoing through the night. When Thana finally decides she's had enough, her quiet rebellion becomes something primal and unstoppable. Censors weren't prepared for this one. They demanded cuts, labeling it too disturbing and too confrontational. But that's exactly what made it great. Ms. 45 wasn't just a Grindhouse flick, it was an urban myth in the making. The idea of a silent woman taking back her power became a rallying cry for audiences who were tired of seeing women treated as background props in cinema. Zoe Lund's performance is haunting. She turns stillness into power, turning every moment of quiet into a storm waiting to break. The movie became a cult classic for those who saw past the shock to the artistry beneath it. Ms. 45 proved that Grindhouse could be both brutal and poetic, fierce and tragic, all at once. Number 3. I Drink Your Blood, 1970. If chaos had a flavor, this movie bottled it. I Drink Your Blood is one of the wildest, most unpredictable rides ever committed to film. Directed by David E. Durston, it follows a group of deranged wanderers who terrorize a small town until a young boy decides to take revenge in the strangest way possible by serving them tainted meat pies that drive them into madness. Yes, it's as wild as it sounds. Once released, theaters didn't know what to do with it. Posters screamed, "Too shocking for the faint-hearted," while audiences dared each other to sit through it. Parents protested, censors recoiled, and midnight screenings sold out. It was banned in some regions and re-edited in others, but nothing could stop the word-of-mouth frenzy. The film's gritty look, jittery editing, and fever dream energy turned it into a symbol of everything Grindhouse stood for: raw, reckless, and completely unfiltered. Each frame feels like it's one step away from falling apart, and that's exactly why it works. I Drink Your Blood didn't just push boundaries, it erased them. The result was a cult phenomenon that made even veteran horror fans question their limits. It's messy, it's loud, and it absolutely refuses to behave. For Grindhouse audiences, that was perfection. Number 2. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. Few movies have changed the language of horror like this one. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre didn't just frighten people, it rewired their definition of fear. Directed by Tobe Hooper, it follows a group of friends who stumble upon a decaying farmhouse and a family whose hobbies include, let's say, unusual craftsmanship. Shot on a shoestring budget under the brutal Texas sun, the film feels like a fever dream captured on celluloid. The gritty texture, the handheld camera work, and the relentless pace make it feel terrifyingly real. The genius is that Hooper barely shows any gore. The power is all in suggestion, the heat, the screams, the sound of that buzzing saw echoing through your bones. Censors went into full panic mode. Some theaters refused to screen it, others slapped it with bans, and critics called it a new low. But audiences couldn't resist. Word spread fast, and soon the film was playing to packed midnight shows around the world. What makes the Texas Chainsaw Massacre immortal isn't just its shock value, it's its atmosphere. Every scene feels wrong in the best way possible. It's the smell of gasoline, the dry wind, the madness just under the surface. It's not just a movie, it's an experience you never really shake off. The message? Fear doesn't need permission. And sometimes the scariest things are the ones that feel real enough to touch. Number 1. Blood Feast, 1963. Every movement needs a first spark, and this was it. Blood Feast didn't just open the door to Grindhouse cinema, it kicked it off its hinges and laughed. Directed by Herschel Gordon Lewis, it's often called the very first splatter film, a colorful, outrageous, and gleefully shocking story about a Miami caterer with some disturbing menu ideas. With almost no budget and no studio backing, Lewis made a movie that broke every rule of polite filmmaking. It was loud, messy, and proudly artificial, but it didn't matter. The effects were crude, the dialogue was wooden, yet audiences had never seen anything like it. People fainted at drive-ins, some towns banned it. Newspapers refused to even print the title. Critics called it garbage, fans called it groundbreaking. What made it special wasn't just the content, it was the attitude. Blood Feast said, "You don't need permission to shock people. You just need imagination and nerve." That spirit became the DNA of every Grindhouse film that followed. Herschel Gordon Lewis didn't care about perfection. He cared about reaction. And he got plenty. The movie's influence spread across decades, inspiring everyone from underground filmmakers to Hollywood veterans who secretly admired its boldness. Blood Feast may look rough today, but without it, Grindhouse wouldn't exist. It's the film that proved chaos could sell tickets, and it never said sorry for it. So, which of these 15 cinematic rebels made you grip your seat the hardest? These weren't just films, they were middle fingers wrapped in celluloid, defying every polite rule the industry tried to enforce. They made us squirm, they made us laugh, and most importantly, they made us feel something real. Drop your favorite Grindhouse moment in the comments, hit that like button, and remember, art doesn't always follow rules. Sometimes it drives right through them.